Today, we are talking about the top factors that determine the value of your workers' compensation settlement. It is the number one most talked about question I get. Everyone wants to know, how do I maximize dollar value? That's what we're here for. Everyone wants to talk money. Today, we're going to talk money. What are the top factors that determine the value of your workers' compensation claim? What medical factors affect the value of your workers' compensation claim? So number one, the nature and the severity of your injury. First and foremost, how bad is your injury? The more serious the injury, the bigger the settlement generally speaking. Also, the permanent or temporary nature, status of your injury has a lot to do with the dollar value. Permanent injuries are worth more. If you have a permanent injury, it's going to get you more money than a temporary injury that will ultimately resolve over time. Multiple injuries generally are worth more. If you hurt multiple body parts, they oftentimes add up and come together for either an overall impairment rating, non-schedule award, or if you have all schedulable injuries. We just met with a client a few months ago, has a knee and a shoulder and an arm and a wrist. Well, those are all schedules. Each one has its own value and they all get added together. The more injuries you have, the more money ultimately your case should be worth. Your disability rating is a huge factor. A higher disability rating means you're entitled to more money as your case goes on, and a higher permanency rating or schedule loss rating means that your permanent disabilities are worth more money as well. The need for future medical treatment. So settlements are higher if future medical care is expected. In circumstances where a person is receiving Social Security disability or Medicare, or they're eligible for either of those two, we have to get that future medical amount, that determination made by Medicare. The Centers for Medicare Services do what's known as a MSA, a Medicare set-aside, and they tell us the value of your future medical. But even in circumstances where that's not required, we still have to evaluate the cost of your future medical and factor that into your settlement. Ongoing treatment will add value to your claim, which is why sometimes the value is greater before you reach maximum medical improvement, because when you reach maximum medical improvement, you don't need much more medical care, and the value of your future medical is down because your doctors have said you're done with your treatment. So you want to kind of get it as it's approaching that MMI. Sometimes you're going to try to settle after you reach maximum medical improvement MMI. Sometimes you want to start the ball rolling before you get to that point, so there's still some uncertainty as to what your future medical picture looks like, and your lawyer can use that to bring up the value of your case. Schedule versus non-schedule injuries, like we just discussed. Schedule injuries, we use the chart, we use the schedule. Every body part has a value, and we use the chart to figure out how much each one of those things is worth. An arm, a total loss of use of an arm gets you 312 weeks of compensation payable to total rate. So a 10% disability to your arm gets you 31.2 weeks of compensation payable to total rate, from which the carrier will take credit for prior payments. Non-schedule, they don't take credit for prior payments. So your weekly benefits are payable based upon your level of disability. If you have a 50% disability, you get 50% rate, which is half of 2/3 of your salary, or 1/3 of your salary for a 50% disability. But they do not take credit against prior payments, and you're paid based upon a pay schedule into the future. 50%, you get 300 weeks of compensation at the 50% rate. That's how medical plays a role here. What about financial factors? What financial factors affect the value of your workers' compensation settlement? The biggest one, average weekly wage, is the biggest factor, the biggest financial factor which affects the value of your workers' compensation settlement. The higher your average weekly wage, the higher your weekly awards, the higher your settlement. And even the most minor mistake is compounded when you're looking at average weekly wage. Being wrong about pennies, once that translates into hundreds of weeks of benefits, that can really add up. And a few dollars off on your average weekly wage could really cost you a lot in the long term. I love figuring out average weekly wage because it's a way to find money in a case where it's not otherwise found. When you walk into your hearing, the judge is going to say, what's the average weekly wage? And the carrier is going to say, oh, we calculated blah, blah, blah. And 9 times out of 10, your lawyer is going to say, yeah, that's fine. Do it without prejudice, just in case I ever want to take the time to look at the paperwork. But we like to figure it out and see exactly where they're getting their number from, because a lot of times if we can show that you earned more, it gets you more. So really super important. I can't stress it enough. Lost wages are another financial factor that affect the value of your workers' compensation claim. Lost time can add value to your claim. In certain circumstances, it could actually work against you, which is why having a lawyer who understands the system is so important. Generally speaking, non-scheduled cases, lost time adds value to your case. Scheduled cases, it could actually reduce the value or reduce your overall money in your pocket. The sooner you go back to work on a scheduled loss case, the sooner you're making your paycheck, the sooner they stop paying you compensation benefits, the less money they get to take credit for at the end of your case. Returning to work at reduced income, reduced earnings, we call it, could be valuable to you, even if it's on a temporary basis and you ultimately heal 100% and you go back and you get back to full duty. That reduced earnings does have value, and you want to keep track of that. You want to keep your pay stubs, keep all your information so that you and your lawyer can sit down and figure out what reduced earnings you have. Cost of future treatment. So this is a medical / financial factor. Expensive future care can increase the settlement value. It will certainly increase the medical side of it, but the fact that you might might need surgery down the road. Surgery equates to more lost time, which equates to more value. And you want to make sure that all this is known by you and your lawyer when you are negotiating your settlement. The insurance company is going to try to close your case. They might pay you more money to entice you to do that so they can avoid those future medical expenses that could be very big. So sometimes we can use it to our advantage, and we try to always do the best we can to maximize case value. What legal factors can affect the value of your workers' compensation settlement? Well, the strength of your case. Well-documented claims that have good support, good evidence, certainly push the insurance company back on their heels and could increase your overall value. And you would think that conversely, disputed claims can reduce settlement value. But in certain circumstances, cases that might have questionable liability or a case that might not be a winner at first glance could have extraordinary value, especially if your lawyer does go and win that case. And we had one this week where there was questionable liability. The insurance company thought they had a sure winner on their hands, and they called me up the day of the hearing and they said, "Hey, this is a waste of our time. We'll give you $5,000 to go away." And I said, "No, it's not worth it. It's worth significantly more than $5,000. And lo and behold, we went into court, we litigated it, and off the bat, right then and there, at that hearing alone, I think I made more than $5,000 for my client on a case that's now continuing, and that person's getting continuing awards. So a disputed claim could have reduced value, but could also have a good amount of value depending on how your lawyer can evaluate that case and see the case for what it's worth. Settlement types. Your type of settlement is a legal factor which can affect the value of your workers' compensation case. A Section 32 settlement is an absolute closure of your case. It cannot be reopened for any reason at any time without the written consent of all parties, including the carrier and the board. And why would the carrier ever agree to reopen a case that's been permanently closed? They paid to close it. So those cases give them a sure, absolute closure. They're going to pay for it. Because they're getting a Section 32 closure in their case, we do our best to get some more value. Even if it's a nuisance value case, we call it consideration in the legal field. I want money for it. A stipulation. So generally we use stipulations. A stipulation is just an agreement. And the stipulation form is really a blank piece of paper. You put the case information on the top and everyone signs at the bottom, and the middle is just blank. And you can write down whatever the two sides agree on. Generally, we use them for awards if we're making an award of compensation for a period of time, or stipulating to schedule loss of use. If we stipulate the schedule loss of use and the case gets closed that way, there is not an absolute closure. You have an ability to reopen your case if there's a worsening in your condition. So the insurance company pays a little less for those, but you have the right to possibly, potentially reopen your case if you need to. So settlement type can certainly have an impact on your value. Insurance company strategies. Different insurance companies handle things different ways. Some insurance companies don't settle cases at all. They're in the minority. Some insurance companies love throwing that low ball first offer to save themselves money. Law of averages. If they make low ball offers to 1,000 clients, 1,000 claimants in this world, if 10 of them take it, they just save that much money. So a lot of insurance companies have that as their opening technique to settling a case. The longer a case stays open, the more it costs the insurance company. It costs them money in medical fees. They got to pay for your doctor and your treatment. They got to pay for legal fees. They got to pay for lawyers to go to court and write appeals and summations. They got to pay for lawyers to review files and review medicals. And you could use that to your advantage. If you're finding this video valuable, don't forget to hit like. Don't forget to subscribe. Timing is another legal factor. And we discussed that earlier. Approaching MMI right around the pinnacle of your case. To me, when I talk about these things, MMI, I see a little bell curve in my head. And that's a bell curve, right? And when I talk about MMI, I see MMI being right at the peak of that bell curve. And when do I want to settle? I want to settle here. MMI is the peak. You've reached maximum medical improvement. The treatment train runs up the hill, gets to the top, and after that, it runs down. When do I want to start looking at settlement? Right before we hit MMI until right after we hit MMI. Waiting too long reduces value. If you've been classified with a permanent disability and you have a 50% disability and you get 300 weeks of benefits, and then you wait 3 years after you were classified, well, they've eaten into that schedule of awards. Your settlement value has just gone down significantly. If you've gotten most or all the treatment you could ever need in this case, settlement value goes down significantly. The best time is often right around that MMI period. What strategic and personal factors affect the value of your workers' compensation settlement? Willingness to negotiate. You need to be willing to negotiate, and you need to be willing to hand over control to your lawyer a little bit. We do this every day. We know what we're doing. We know the players. We know who we're talking to. I know certain insurance companies and adjusters and attorneys that play hardball, and you got to do the back and forth 10 rounds with Leon Spinks to get to a point of agreement. I know there's a lot of other adjusters and attorneys that say, look, this is what we're offering. We think it's fair. It's in the ballpark. Let's get this done. And it's a lot less back and forth and ponging. And it's shocking how people sometimes don't do that. You have to have a willingness to negotiate and a willingness to cede control. You don't want to accept the first offer, generally speaking. Be willing to negotiate. Don't just think the first thing that comes through is going to be the end all be all of your case. Also, sometimes you need to have a willingness to litigate. Sometimes you got to just say, enough of this crap. We're putting the gloves on and we're going to fight. Every time you fight in court for an issue, whether it's degree of disability and the related benefits, whatever it is you're fighting for, every time you win a particular aspect, your case should notch up in value a little bit because you're getting more. So sometimes you need to be open to have that willingness to go to court. Don't be afraid, especially if you and your lawyer agree to that. I literally had a phone call with a client where they offered him dog poop, and then I showed them where the value in the case is, and now they offered him a little dog poop with cat poop on top. And all I said to him is, we're going to court. We have a hearing coming up already. Let's go to court. Let's fight this thing and see what happens. Got nothing to lose. And we're on the same page and we agree, and we're going to go in there and beat him over the head and try to get the money we can get. So sometimes you need to have that willingness to litigate. Leverage over the insurance company. The insurer wants to avoid setting precedent, public exposure, or court costs. We saw it with COVID. We saw it with people getting COVID at work. Sometimes when something new comes across the table that we really haven't seen before, the insurance companies are afraid to set a precedent as to what is compensable and what's not, or what is valuable and what is not. And that could be worth money depending on your type of case. Public exposure. We talked about those high profile newsworthy cases. Sometimes they want to avoid the papers. They want to avoid the press, and maybe that could be worth money to you as well. The other thing is court costs and legal expenses. Do you really want to take depositions of 12 doctors, insurance company, when we're not too far apart on degree of disability? Or do you want to sit and beat this thing to death when we could just have a 5-minute discussion, work out a rate, move the case on? So using that leverage over the insurance company could have value to you. Strategy. It's important. It's not always just putting your head down and blasting through the offensive line into the defensive secondary. Sometimes you want some strategy when you're planning out your next play, and that's how it works. Urgency or desperation is another personal factor, an important personal factor that really lends itself to the value of your case. Do you need the money right away? We've had clients that are getting foreclosed on, and they say, I don't care that my case is worth triple what you're telling me. I need it, and I need it as soon as possible. And it's unfortunate. We try to do what we can to just get it done quickly for as much as possible, rather than as much as possible being the priority and then quickly. But it's just the way it is. If you don't need the money right away, then hold out. Try to get more. You have the time and you have the resources to hold out and try to get more money. Get more money. The last strategic factor is having a good lawyer. Studies have shown that having a lawyer gets you more money. So talk to a lawyer. Get a consultation. It's free. It's easy. We know what we're doing, and it's certainly worth your time. And if you need a lawyer, you can always call me, 212-406-8989. I am Rex Sikofsky. If you need help with a New York workers' compensation case, personal injury case, if you need help finding a labor and employment attorney, if you need help finding a social security attorney. All right, folks, thank you. I love each and every one of you, and I will see you guys. Bye-bye.